Hello and welcome to this brand new episode of Return to the Source. I'm your host NantenJex, and joining me today we have a very special guest. It is Omni Jacala from Curiomatic. So Omni, why don't we start this interview off by just having you introduce yourself and talk about what your current big project is that I brought you on to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, my name is Omni Jacala. I'm also known as ArtsyOmni in certain circles. And I am a co-founder and art director at Curiomatic. And we're here to talk about Rollin Rascal.
Yes, yep. And first off, congratulations on the very successful Kickstarter.
Thank you, yeah.
What was it, 12 hours? And then you were fully funded, at least for the first, for the first milestone anyway?
Yes. 12 hours, which was a really big deal. Like, we've seen other Kickstarters get funded that quickly with similar funding goals, but like we weren't expecting it. So we knew it was hypothetically possible, but it was still a really nice surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I was impressed. I think you put a demo out and it was like very solid. I think it probably got a lot of people over. I wanted to try. I always like trying demos out before I back Kickstarter projects. And so I gave it a good go, and yeah, I was very blown away by what you've managed to do in a pre-alpha, no less. So immediately backed that thing, which I think this might be the first Kickstarter project I've backed in a while, actually.
Awesome.
So it's got me quite excited.
Yeah,
and that's
definitely
part of why I wanted to bring you on, because Rollin Rascal looks to be a very exciting indie game, and I know that there's a lot of Source Gaming fans who'll know you from your previous work here, know you and the team at Curiomatic, and I thought it might be a good way to pick your brains as a games art lead, a director and designer. So before we actually get to Rollin Rascal though, I did want to talk about Curiomatic, the company you and Chris Sheshel, who's the creative director on this project, founded, and how Rollin Rascal kind of came about. Because my understanding is that it was originally the idea behind its lead designer, Gabriel Gonzalez. And then both you and Chris met him, and sort of the stars aligned and you started working on the project. So how did that happen exactly?
Yeah. So like you said, Gabriel had been working on the project on his own for a few years before Curiomatic got involved. And our company had been working in the game development space for a number of years now as an outsourcing studio. So we've had the opportunity to work with various indie game companies to assist them with asset production. And none of the games that we've worked on so far have been revealed yet. So thankfully, we also poured 2 years of our lives into this Mother 3 tribute project. And that got a lot of people's attention. So I had personally been acquainted with Gabriel through the Sonic fan game community. So Gabriel had reached out to me to see if Curiomatic would be interested in helping with art asset production. And so Gabriel started out as just one of many clients. And initially, he became more involved with Curiomatic projects as a programmer. And so we realized that working together on Rascal could be, like, in a co-developer role, could be a great way to, I guess, get a game out into the world sooner and also in like a fully realized form. So the scope of the game felt reasonable, and the foundation that Gabriel had laid was a really solid, strong foundation. So we decided to just go all in on Rollin Rascal.
Nice. Bump it up from just a one-man team on a passion project from a fan game into like a full-blown indie game experience.
Right. Exactly.
Nice. And so I want to know, when it was a passion project and stuff, like kind of how Gabriel had it visualized, because I know he began working with like a Sonic QT or something, a Sonic Q, something like that. It was a
Sonic GT.
Sonic GT. Yeah. There we go.
QT is a character.
QT. Yes, that's what my brain was getting mixed up. Sonic GT, and Rascal's kind of very similar to it, but then you guys have come in and given it its whole identity as Rollin Rascal, and I imagine as the art director you are the main creative force behind a lot of this, about its characters, its worlds, everything on the visual look you've been leading the front on. So can you sort of tell me how the inspiration for a lot of this came about, and Rollin Rascal's unique sort of world design?
So I don't know that I would say that I've been the main creative force behind the world. We have, a really great team of artists, and we also have a very inclusive environment for fostering ideas. So the world is definitely the result of a lot of people's efforts. Chris, our creative director, he's really good at coming up with ideas. Sammy Briggs, one of our concept artists, is really great at creating appealing character designs, and so she's often taking Chris's ideas and executing on those. So I would say my role is more to sort of guide these ideas into a really cohesive whole and ensure that every facet of the game is considered as we try to create all of these different characters in the world, because I sort of have a jack of all trades sort of approach to things. So I feel like I excel at taking the big picture and making sure that things form together cohesively. So I sort of just help bring those ideas into their final form and maintain the level of quality that we're known for.
Right. Fair enough. So in terms of like actual inspirations then, was the character of Rascal something that Chris specifically came up with, or was it something that the concept artist kind of took, like as you said, took the idea and drew up all the concepts and then it went back and forth? Because I noticed that Rascal has quite a lot of Sonic energy to him, and it seems like quite a big inspiration in that, and I'm kind of wondering if did that come about partly because of how the game was structured, like obviously Sonic GT and then making a kind of Sonic-ish like game, and then let's have a protagonist who's kind of similar, or was it a bit more of the other way around where the initial design came out and it was like, this is like he kind of has that sort of edge, this Sonic-y vibe to him. How are we going to how will this influence how we approach the game design and the various aspects of that?
Right, yeah. So with Rascal's design in particular was something that, of all of the characters that we've shown so far, Rascal's design was already sort of established by other artists that Gabriel had worked with previously. So as far as his design specifically goes, I don't really know that I could speak toward how much Sonic specific influence is there. I know there's obviously a lot of overlap in their sort of personalities, and so it's easy to compare the two, but I would probably say a significant difference between the two characters is that Rascal is a younger character. So he brings a little bit more of a youthful energy to the table, which is something that we're trying to sell through animations and cutscenes and gameplay. So maybe Rascal is a bit goofier, maybe more mischievous. He's sort of just out there to have as much fun as possible. So that's sort of our approach to the character.
Nice. So I guess then, because there was something other related to Rascal's design that I was curious about, but maybe you're not familiar. Maybe Gabriel told you. I found it really interesting when playing the game how this game, it obviously has kind of like a spin dash similar to Sonic, but Rascal sort of just goes down to his head and then his ponytail, and then revs up that way. Right. And I was like, how does that work? What's going on here? What's happening to his body? Is it shrinking into him? How does that happen?
It's a fair question. So Rascal's body sort of has this ability to like reconfigure itself. Like the texture of his body is sort of like rubbery, so he's able to just kind of reform. So it's probably closer to like Samus in that regard. But I would say the world of Rascal is very whimsical. It really prioritizes fun rather than realism. So we try not to stipulate too much on the details.
You're telling me
something I have to be.
You're just telling me not to think too hard about it, basically.
Well, it's funny because, like, me personally, I have to be very deliberate about not thinking too hard about things because I tend to try to explain things when I do world building. So I'm sort of like adopting someone else's world and someone else's creation. So I have to remind myself, like, it's okay for certain things to be a mystery. So that's our approach. Yeah.
So the other thing I thought was interesting with Rascal's design comes from the multiplayer aspect of the game. I know that when you do multiplayer, which is an online multiplayer where players race each other, everyone's playing as Rascal, and to differentiate it, everyone has a different coloured Rascal. And I know that you've also now passed a milestone on the Kickstarter where you're going to let people customise what colour specifically on the colour wheel to make their own personalised Rascal. Yeah. And I'm curious if this influenced the design of the character or in any way, or the way you approached modelling it or texturing it or anything like that. Because it's giving players a lot of creative freedom, and I guess this also applies to later on if the costume milestone also gets passed. is this something that you've had to like really think about when designing the characters and making the assets for the game?
I'm not sure that I have a really concrete answer on whether the color customization influenced the design. As far as I'm aware, the palette swap idea was just a natural result of, needing to differentiate between players in the multiplayer. But it is sort of serendipitous, I guess, that, Rascal has this very, like, two-color design that we can give players an opportunity to customize. So that's, I guess, a happy accident, perhaps. But, like I said, Rascal's design was already kind of essentially set before Curiomatic got involved. So I would say the current look of Rascal has been largely a direct result of Sammy's interpretation of the character, which we knew that Sammy was going to be developing the rest of the cast, so we wanted to make sure that Rascal fit into that. So we sort of adjusted Rascal's design a bit to align with her design vocabulary. Yeah.
Okay, and that's a pretty good segue then into what my next question was going to be, because Rascal was established kind of before, but characters like QT, which is Rascal's sister, and Brisk, who's Rascal's friend, as well as all the enemies found throughout the game, all the robot pirate and the robot boar, I guess it is. Like, what was sort of some of the inspiration from that? If Rascal was already there, was it started as a base, and then how can we make characters who kind of come off of his design? Or were there other factors involved in that?
Yeah, so QT's design in particular was an evolution of an idea that was already in place when we, came on board. Her design hadn't been, concretely established, but we knew that Rascal would have an older sister. And there were some preliminary concepts that had been sketched up, but we wanted to start with a blank slate and focus on character traits that we wanted to embody with the design. So we knew we wanted Rascal to have a character that was close to him and that would sort of balance out his youthful energy with a more calm and logical approach to the world. So, and there are also game mechanics that we wanted to try to ground in the world building. So we wanted QT to be sort of like a wizard with gadgets, so that she could equip Rascal with certain things that we could use to sort of inform the game mechanics. So those characteristics are really what honed QT's design in particular. And as far as like the general design language is concerned, Rascal definitely sort of laid the groundwork for that. So like the striped design is something that's just that's something that's a through line with all of the characters that belong to Rascal's
side of things,
species, I guess.
I'm guessing they can also all rev up into a ball then, and all
they can all become a ball.
Nice. So on the Kickstarter page, it was mentioned that Super Mario Sunshine and Sonic Adventure 2 were some of the big inspirations for Rollin Rascal. But when I was playing it, I actually got quite a big Crash Bandicoot vibe from it. Starting on the beach, being able to hijack enemies is kind of similar to Mind Over Mutant. And even the dynamic between Rascal and QT is kind of similar to Crash and Coco. Obviously, Crash is a bit more deranged to balance out Coco's more balanced nature. But it's kind of a similar vibe, just with mischievous and a bit more level-headedness. So I'm gonna assume that Crash Bandicoot was also a big inspiration, so I was kind of curious what other inspirations might be there, either in stuff we've seen or stuff we haven't seen.
Sure. It's actually a little funny. We've seen a number of people mention Crash Bandicoot, which is, I guess, a coincidence because none of us on the team have really, well, I should say, none of us on the leads, like, Gabriel and Chris and I, we haven't really engaged that much with the Crash Bandicoot franchise. So I guess those similarities are just coincidental, or maybe subconscious. I don't know. But I would say one of the strongest influences, aside from the two that you had already mentioned, would be Mario Odyssey, which has the capture mechanic. We wanted Rascal to have a very similar sort of dynamic where the enemies can sort of, the enemies that you can override, change the way that you engage with the level design, change the way that you approach, paths, and just coming up with creative ways through the level.
Okay. Alright, so I guess we'll be expecting to see a lot more of them then, other than just the singular pirate enemy that punches and breaks big blocks down. There's going to be a lot of variation.
We're going to be coming up with a lot of them.
Nice, I look forward to it. So, going to my experience when I was playing the demo now, one of the things that surprised me the most was just how long the level was. Because when I feel like a thing when I'm thinking of modern Sonic games as an example, a lot of their levels end up being like under 2 minutes long. Because Sonic's just blasting through the world. And when I went into Rollin Rascal and I saw what it was from like trailers, I kind of expected the same thing. like the level would be like 4 minutes, running, going fast, different routes and all this. But I think I was in that first level for like close to 9 minutes.
Sure.
Maybe even 10. I don't know, maybe I'm just bad. But the level felt quite long. And I was wondering how that sort of might have affected your approach to designing this, because there's a lot of set pieces that come up in that first world, like areas where there's like a beach hut and volleyball net and soccer ball, and you can kick the ball into the net, and it just kind of comes up like once, like halfway through the level. And I noticed that a few times, that as the level changed, very specific things just happened that almost you'd like blink and miss it. So I'm curious how this sort of affected level and world design from the art sort of standpoint and the asset standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as like Buccaneers Beach is concerned, that's sort of been like our flagship level that we've been using to really determine how to approach level design. So it is a pretty lengthy level, and it's possible that level will end up actually being a little bit shorter in the final product, possibly. But I think anyone in the Sonic community with a mind for game design in particular is probably aware of the sort of perennial dilemma that Sonic has, where you have to create these really big levels. And so, because Sonic can run so much faster than any other platforming character. So coming up with ways to rapidly prototype levels and build levels is obviously very important.
Yeah.
And this is going to be probably a little technical, but one of the biggest things that has been sort of a breakthrough in level production was the introduction of geometry nodes in Blender, which is basically a way to, it makes it possible to procedurally create complex environment assets by only specifying things in their most simple form. So maybe you'd specify like the top surface of a platform and the specific slope it has, and then the geometry node setup will let you generate like the cliff side and all of the different parts that would go onto that. And so that makes it a lot easier to build a lot of level very quickly. But essentially, like the evolution and sort of like the democratization of 3D tools like Blender has definitely made it more possible for smaller teams like ours to create games of increasing scope.
One of the things from your own, as you mentioned, you've got a jack of all trades approach to things. I know that the music for this game is done by Max Bradley, who many people might know online as Scruffy, the Pikmin guy. But I know, because you've also got a lot of experience with music productions, have you been involved in the sound side of Rollin Rascal at all?
No, not me. No, I haven't touched any of the sound on this one. I'm more of a hobbyist when it comes to music,
right,
so
okay.
I wouldn't say I'm particularly qualified to be creating music at this scale. For smaller games, perhaps, I've done that in the past, and I'm going to continue to do that with smaller projects, but, I'm happy to just leave that in the hands of much more seasoned professionals. Yeah.
Get it. Speaking of smaller projects, this isn't your first time actually being involved in making a video game, because you've also worked on a title for mobile called Gutsy the Guinea Pig, and that was like a 2-man project, if I understand correctly. So this is far bigger in scope. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective how it's been comparatively to that.
Yeah. Just for context, Gutsy is a game that Phil, my friend Phil and I, Phil Ogden and I worked on. We're a tiny studio called Drizzle Games, and we work on smaller stuff in our spare time. But Rascal, I would say, is primarily different because the scope of the game, like you mentioned, as well as just the breadth of creative talent that's involved. Curiomatic is not a huge team by any stretch, but people are able to keep to their specializations a lot more. Individuals don't have to wear as many hats, even though I'm very used to doing that. And there's still times where one of us will end up doing something that's not necessarily in the purview of what our formal title is.
Flexible,
but it is nice to be able to, it's nice to be able to focus on your strengths rather than having to sort of stretch yourself thin, trying to do the jack of all trades thing. So that's been a nice change. Yeah.
Going back then now, from Rollin Rascal back to your past works, I think a lot of the people here will know you from the Smashified series that began, I think I checked this, nearly a decade ago now, later this year.
Don't say that.
It makes me feel just as old.
Yeah.
But when you were back then doing this, could you have imagined that this sort of pathway of making these kind of fan renders would lead you down the road to Curiomatic and now eventually Rollin Rascal?
No, I don't think I would have possibly have guessed that would have been where it led to. When I started Smashified, I knew I wanted to use it as a way to sort of build an audience so that potentially it could lead to engagement with games that I would want to make. I'd been working with Phil on games since 2009 when we were in college. And now Phil's even been able to contribute to Rascal with development of the official website, which you can visit at rollinrascal.com. So, all of these endeavors sort of feed into each other eventually. But even as far back as 2017, we were already starting to work with indie studios in smaller capacities. Like with A Hat in Time, we were able to create some promotional artwork and even some in-game assets. And now we've had the opportunity to work with a lot of bigger players in the indie space, which has been really great to give us experience. And we've been able to get advice from other people who have run successful Kickstarter campaigns, which has been really great. We recently worked with Chad over at Chadtronic on Poglings, which was funded last year on Kickstarter. So it's been, really great to learn from these people, and it's exciting to imagine where it'll go from here because this is our first game, and I have to imagine we'll be doing more from here. So
no, lots of projects in the pipeline. It'll be exciting when you can finally reveal them all to the world and get them out there. Because that's something like I feel like, as someone who's been following your work since those Smashified days and seeing how it's developed from when you were doing 2D stuff to then actually using 3D models and watching the old development videos that you had in the lives, I feel like Curiomatic has a very specific kind of style to it. And like even before, when Rollin Rascal was announced, even before seeing that Curiomatic were attached to it, part of me could kind of tell instinctively that it was a game that you guys were working on. Because a lot of the key art and a lot of the renders and the way the models kind of reminded me a lot of the Smashified stuff and the Mother 3 tribute and the work you'd done on A Hat in Time. Would you say that's kind of like the Curiomatic style? Is it something you've noticed yourself?
Yeah, I would say we're playing to our strengths when it comes to how we present the artwork for the game. There's perhaps some aspects of our work that have changed a bit over the years, but when it comes to creating key artwork, especially for character renders, there's just something about like a nicely lit, complex materials and rich textured render that really appeals to people, and so it gives a project sort of a sense of scale. So when it comes to marketing, especially a new IP, it can't be understated how important it is to make it feel like the IP has almost been established already. So creating renders like that kind of creates the illusion that this is like a character who's had the chance to evolve over decades, but it's a brand new character. So
you want to get that character's personality like out there immediately, and some dynamic posing and making them the focus of it. So with lots of different key pieces of key art is a great way of getting that out and doing that.
Absolutely.
So similar to the music question I had before, another thing that you've worked on in the past is typefaces. Specifically, you worked on the Hylia Serif project. And I was curious whether or not the typeface in Rollin Rascal is something of your own creation or not.
Maybe no. The one that's currently in the demo is a typeface that there's a couple of typefaces there that were already being used back before we even called it Rollin Rascal. It was Project Rascal back then. But I do absolutely intend to create a custom typeface for the game to probably replace what's there. So you can expect that to change before the final product releases.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so I've just 2 questions left, really. The first one, and this is the one that we ask every person that we interview, because we're a Smash Brothers channel, and which character do you want them to see them add to the next Super Smash Bros? And you can't say Rascal, that's cheating. You can't say Rascal.
Well, I mean, I feel like for me, this is an easy one because my answer really hasn't changed since 2015. If I had to pick one character, it would have to be Rayman.
Okay.
But if that's boring, because that's sort of expected. If that's boring, then I would probably say Klonoa.
That was my really backup thought for you.
Yeah, really soft spot for that character, and I know it's entirely unrealistic for that to happen.
You never know, Klonoa got a brand new, well, not brand new, but it got a remake of its first 2 games. On Switch.
Yeah, I played that on Steam. I was really happy to play that. Yeah. But I think even though I know it's never going to happen, like Clannad would be a dream come true, and the pun is absolutely intended there.
All right, and then my last question is a very open-ended one to you. Is there anything you want to say to the audience for Rollin Rascal that we haven't discussed already?
Yeah, I would say, Rollin Rascal is probably, obviously very similar to Sonic, but I think the biggest difference would be that we want this to be a very accessible game. One of the core goals of Rascal is to just make sure that players that aren't necessarily preoccupied with speed running or being the fastest possible player still have a way to sort of engage with the game. And so, like you mentioned, there's parts of the levels that little details like the soccer goals and the volleyball net and things like that. There's little things that can give players who aren't necessarily trying to blast through the level something to discover, and sort of little moments of delight there. So that's a big thing that we're trying to use to differentiate. And so, we want to keep attention to the little details in our game, which is something that plays into the narrative theme there. So we can't really talk too much about story yet.
No,
but,
of course.
Just wanted to kind of touch on what kind of gives the game a unique flavor.
Yeah, players who don't want to blast through, give them something to explore and discover and just sort of vibe in the world of Rollin Rascal.
Yeah, because high speed gameplay is sort of a barrier for a lot of people because it asks a lot of your reflexes and your coordination. So with people who are maybe more used to games like Mario, we wanted something that feels a bit more familiar to them too. So yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you, Omni, for agreeing to the interview and coming on. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. And for everyone who's watching, the Kickstarter for Rollin Rascal will still be live when this video goes up, assuming you're watching this video as it's gone up and not months later down the line. Hell, you might be playing Rollin Rascal when you see this interview. Maybe. So we're going to include a link to the Kickstarter down in the description below. So if anything here has interested you, go and check that out immediately after this. Alright guys, as always, hit that subscribe button so that you remember to return to the source.